Imagine this. You open your dashboard. The numbers look fine. Occupancy's steady. Reviews are still coming in. Cleaners are scheduled. Guests are checked in. Someone's asking if prices should move this weekend. Nothing is obviously wrong, but something's changed. Your owners are being targeted. They keep seeing ads saying, fully automated, 5% commission, no human required. And slowly, the question stops being, are you doing a good job? Becomes, do they still understand what you're here to do? Today on The Check-In, we're talking about the human moat, the things that don't show up in a task list, the judgment, context and accountability that no algorithm can replicate. Because in a colder, more efficient industry, the ones who survive won't be the cheapest. They'll be the hardest to replace. Welcome to The Check-In.
Hey, Leo. How's it going,
Hello.
buddy?
Good morning, Sarah Nanda. Happy New Year, my friend. It's been ages, hasn't it?
Happy New Year. It's so good to see you. I've missed you, buddy. It's been a couple of weeks since we recorded.
I don't think it's right that we don't spend Christmas together. That next Christmas, let's get all the families together, right? Let's rent a big property and let's just spend 2 weeks together podcasting every day.
That sounds great. I think the audience would love that.
I'm pretty sure the family would hate it. Live streaming Christmas presents being opened. Tell us quickly, how's it been? Has you had a nice break?
It was really, really nice. Yeah, there's been lots of travel. My in-laws have been here, so we took them down to the south of Spain for about 10 days and gallivanted all around. And it was really lovely. It's good to be back home, I think, in the routine. It's odd. I was ready to go back to work. So I think that's a good sign. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, we switched off. We switched off for 10 days. It was amazing. It's nice. I feel like the opportunity to do it only really presents itself at Christmas because everybody stops. So all your clients, all your partners, all of your colleagues are stopping in the most part, with the exception of the operational guys keeping the lights on. But everyone's trying to work as little as possible and be with family. So you've just got to embrace it, I think. I struggle to switch off fully during a summer holiday for the obvious reason that the business world's still turning. But Christmas, I really managed to switch off and just spend a good bit of quality time with the kids. I was definitely pleased to get back to my desk on Monday and start doing my job again because I hadn't done it in so long. But I wouldn't say I necessarily was missing it over the Christmas period because with 2 kids running around, it was kind of a lot of things to distract us. But you'll be proud of me. Chance for a not so subtle, humble brag, but I did run in and swim on Christmas Day.
No way.
I did it. Jumped in, buddy. We had amazing weather. The beach everyone was running in at 11 o'clock and I did it. I did it with some Mercedes friends' parents and we ran in. Not long enough to call it a swim, but certainly a kind of like, a quick immersion and out again.
They do that in Barcelona in the port, and I've always thought it was absolutely impressive. And yours is even more impressive, Leo, because I bet it's way colder out there.
When we had a big team in Barcelona, I would go to Barcelona regularly, and I would swim in December, January at the beach there, and they'd be like, "What are you doing? You're crazy." I'm like, This is like swimming in May in the UK. This is warm, guys. This is warm.
I went to the beach as a kid always, and we would go at Thanksgiving every year. And there was always some Yankees swimming out in the ocean in November in South Carolina. I remember my grandpa would always go, "Oh, the Yankees are back. They're out swimming." So anyway, yeah, I guess it's whatever you're used to, isn't it?
I like the casual use of Yankee. That's someone from the north then, right?
And it's not offensive. Okay. People find
yeah.
it's not for me. It's not offensive. It's a term of endearment. Most of my friends in Barcelona are Yankees.
Yeah, old habits die hard. Alrighty, well, look, let's get into it. We're really excited to talk about this. We know that the topic of AI is everywhere. This is an episode for any professional host or property manager who is feeling that pressure when it comes to proving the value and justifying the fee and focusing on retaining owners in what is becoming a tougher landscape. I think there's lots of things we'll say today about AI, but one of the mindset shifts that's happening, I think, is people are looking at what they're spending on different parts of their business or different parts of their lives. So everything's kind of up for grabs at the moment. So grandiose claims like, we can fully automate this, that, and the other are all being listened to. So never has there been a time where the norms have been challenged so much in the short-term rental industry, going back even to like the tech revolution that happened in short-term rental, when we moved from brochures and magazine advertising to the internet. I think this is a bigger disruption. So yeah, it's trying to talk today about this idea that, you can use AI, right? It can help you to replace tasks, but really it's about what you are doing as a person, an operator, a human, to add value and prove that you're doing what your owner needs to ensure that their property is being looked after and booked out as much as possible. Anything else you'd like to add on that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think I just want to remind the audience, AI is only as good as the data that we input into AI. So, for years and years, there's been dynamic pricing softwares. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody who's 100% satisfied with their dynamic pricing software. Why? Because it's largely algorithmically determined. And so there's always going to be edge cases where, the property manager who knows that local market or knows that maybe there's a specific event that hasn't been picked up in the data yet, but that they know that they can raise prices for needs to be taken into account. So I think that's the first side of things. This concept it's not new. It's always sort of existed. And I think in general, I listen to a bunch of podcasts on AI and what's going to happen in the future. I've been super down the rabbit hole there over the holidays on that. But one of the things that I keep hearing over and over that I would tend to agree with is what's not going to be replaced are the uniquely human things. So what that might mean is maybe we go back to in-person check-ins. I know they're a hassle, but maybe that's one of the things that we do to set us apart. Maybe we go back to, depending obviously on the type of property you have, if it's property that is super budget, maybe you can't afford to do this, but leaving a welcome basket, having a quick either website or booklet in the property where people can look through. So something a little bit more old school, a little bit more physical that people can look at rather than everything being so AI and so, I guess, artificial. So it seems like what we're clinging to, and I think especially when we're looking at a vacation or a holiday experience, is going to be something that is human, uniquely human. So that's really what's going to set people apart. So it's just want to frame the episode that it's not meant to be oh my gosh, AI is going to take over and we're all going to lose our jobs. It's about identifying areas where you can become more efficient using AI, and in the things where you do need a uniquely human touch, that you're able to continue to do that. Some of the things come to mind. I know you and I talked about this when we were planning the episode, Leo, but local councils that maybe you hear before prices even hit the market that they've just approved a new festival, or they're going to be hosting a new festival. So these types of things where you can really get ahead of the market that AI can't necessarily pick up, or I don't know, construction in the house next door. That's going to impact your ratings. AI doesn't know that there's going to be banging from 8 a.m. every day for the next 6 months. So there's a bunch of things like that AI maybe doesn't necessarily know, at least not yet, that you can bring to the table in that local expertise.
I love it. It goes back to the core of what we talk about when we first started podcasting together all those many years ago, which is the idea of hyperlocal. We're going to be featuring that a little bit more in the next couple of weeks as well. And slight callback to the Scale France interview we did with Louis, which we released over Christmas, was this idea of like understanding what you're offering, brand identity, building. Yeah, you can see that as being, if you have a niche like skiing, but maybe it's just your niche is your city that you know better than anybody else. So what can you be doing to add the value? And I think you're right, Sarah. It's knowing, okay, actually there's a lot of construction that's going to be happening on this street for the next 2 years. So I'm actually not going to take on properties here, and I'm going to divert my attention onto this side. Or I know that there's a new development going up in the west side of my city. So what the data will not show is the potential of bringing guests to the west side of my city yet, because it just hasn't happened yet. But I know they've just built a new development. The marina's just been refurbished, and or there's an Olympics coming and the stadium's going to be 10 miles out of town over here. So let's pick up some properties now. It's about nous. That's the most important thing, which is why I feel very confident with the position of the property managers within the space, because I know the ones that I meet and speak to the whole time, it's just got so much nous and savvy about what's going on in their markets, right? And that's something that if you're an owner choosing which way to go, you're going to want to invest in that person if they can show the value they're at. You also made it about hospitality. Really, really good point. If we are liberating ourselves from the day-to-day tasks more and more with AI agents, doesn't that just make it worth your while to turn up there and say hi and speak to that guest? Because at the same time as growing a property business where you're adding inventory, you also want to get that repeat guest or build that network. And those additional touches that you can do mean that guest might come back, or they might tell their friend to come and stay with you when they come. So it's all about building out your guest avatar as well as your host avatar. So I genuinely think it's really exciting, because when I think back to kind of 2-3 years ago, the chat at the time, and you're long in the tooth like me, you've been around long enough to remember this, was how do I get out of the day-to-day of my business? That's where everyone was. They were stuck. They're saying, property management, it's dirty work. It's really tough work. And even before AI, I feel like tools were improving such that people were then able to kind of lift their head slightly above the water. If you are lifting your head above the water, that's the time to double down and put your time back into the hospitality. In my humble opinion, rather than say, great, I've liberated myself, I'm going to sit on the beach. It's actually, no, I've got this time back. How can I add incremental value or become more of a hospitality provider.
Completely agree with that. I have an interesting anecdote to share from one of the adventures of our Christmas holiday. We went down to the south of Spain, and in particular over the days of Christmas, so the 23rd, 24th, 25th, we rented an apartment so that we could cook a nice Christmas dinner. Asked twice before we checked in, hey, just making sure there's an oven, please confirm. Confirmed. Yes, there is an oven. Brilliant. So before we checked in, because it was an automated check-in where we just were given a code, we went to this grocery store. And so I bought like a Wellington roast, and I bought some pork ribs and I bought things that need an oven. And we get to check into the apartment and there is no oven. There is a microwave oven, very different. So not even a microwave that has oven functionalities, just a microwave, So I ended up asking again, hi, are you sure this is an oven? Because this looks like a microwave. And we have all these things. The owner of the property called me personally on December 24th, bless, and said, hi, I know you're going to have to cook your Christmas dinner. And I just feel awful because he's like, I don't know who told you that we had an oven, but there's no oven in that unit. And listen, I've got 3 options for you. He said, I live about 4 blocks away. So you're welcome to come over and use my oven. Because it's your Christmas meal. Number 2, he's like, you can let me know. We'll drop by. My wife, just leave the meat in the fridge and tell us what it is. And my wife is a really good cook, and she'll come and pick it up, and we'll cook it for you, and we'll bring it back to you. And I thought, like, I'm not going to put myself in this man's personal home over Christmas. It's a really nice offer, right? But just the fact that he offered was great. So what I ended up doing was getting on ChatGPT and saying, I don't have an oven. I have these things I have to cook. What's the best way? And it said a pressure cooker. So I called him back and I said, hey, I've been thinking about this. Any chance you got a pressure cooker? So it turned out he did. And he brought over the pressure cooker. And not only did they leave the pressure cooker, he left. In Spain, they eat these sweet treats at Christmas that are called polvorones. I hate them. It's like almond flour that you crush and then eat, and then it just gets all stuck in your palate. But Spanish people love them. Anyway, he put some really nice polvorones in there, and they were the nice kind. They weren't like the cheap ones, So I'm just thinking about this whole process of like, that's what makes a difference. Somebody calling you on Christmas Eve and saying like, even if it's, and he genuinely would have offered us the oven in his home. This is what makes the difference between that versus like we had another check-in experience, which was absolutely awful. It was like, we had messaged 2 days before, hey, I have to work in the morning. Where can I work from? Or can we check in early? Where do we leave our bags? No response. So we were just on the street with all of our bags for 4 hours and me trying to find a cafe. Like that was a terrible experience. So the contrast of that, even though actually the second apartment I would say was nicer, like the one where the customer service was not great, they got a way worse review and I had a way worse experience than I did in the other property just because of the human element of what was involved there. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it goes back to old school hospitality and kind of the roots of what our industry was before a lot of the technology. So let the technology make things easier for you, take away a lot of the day-to-day, like maybe the check-in, so that you're available when somebody needs an oven or a pressure cooker on Christmas Eve.
Well, that's it. That whole thing started with a mistake somewhere.
Yep. Yeah.
Even like a fully automated AI process, mistakes are going to occur because there's going to be human input somewhere, right? So someone's had to like input all the things about the listing somewhere. It's not a house built on solid foundations always. Maybe the data's been pulled from an OTA where it's come from, the wrong tag has sat with the wrong piece of information that links to that property. Like it's not a perfect world. We know it's not far from it when it comes to how these SaaS businesses at the moment speak to each other. So translate that into the AI world. If you have a fully automated AI system without a human who runs it or is accountable for it, again, the minute something goes wrong, that's when you're at 6s and 7s. You really are like you're in trouble, which is why I do believe that. Again, I don't think AI is here to replace the job. It is here to liberate us as property people, and certainly the clients that I speak to be like, if I use it, I can master it and I can be sat at the end so that I can be that person that goes, right, I'm going to go and rectify this mistake. And hey, do you know what? I do have the time to go down and get you a pressure cooker and turn up in the house. So I would say, like, let's be ambitious for our industry and let's scale that further. How do you make sure that you're being proactive? And I think we'll come on to some proactive things later on in this episode. But that's the first thing I would say is that what of everything you've said to me, the thing that has stayed with me the most when I think about what excites me about our industry is this idea that there is a welcome hamper and a fridge fill. And it's going back to this hyper-local. I know the local wine shop, and so I've put the local wine in there. I can tell you a story about this beer. I can tell you a story about this cake, tell you a story about this loaf of bread. All of that is what makes an experience memorable. I went for a run this morning. Shout out to our friend Ben from previous episode, just to prove that we do actually go running on a Friday, Sarah. It's not just made up for social media.
I didn't see any photographic evidence, Leo. So until then, I'll withhold my judgment.
Keep looking at LinkedIn. I could share my Strava, but I'm not going to because it's just the most middle-aged thing I've ever said. Oh my God. Jasmine would divorce me if she heard me talking like that. Right. Okay. So we were talking about this idea of like what makes a holiday memorable. So we were having a bit of a wide discussion. I was saying like it's where you feel like you have been welcomed by someone who knows the area. Don't make that mistake. Go to this restaurant. When you go to this restaurant, this restaurateur knows me really well, and they're going to give you the best seat in the restaurant. It's all of that. That is really what makes the difference. It's the personal touch, isn't it? That's what makes a holiday memorable, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting you mentioned that. That was also, I didn't even realize this, but it was part of our check-in process. So as soon as we did the check-in, like when we uploaded our documents and stuff online before we checked in, we got our codes. And as soon as we got the codes to access in the place where the guy brought us the pressure cooker, he also sent a list of like, hey, if you're looking for a really nice cut of meat, this is where you should go. If you're looking for, their specialty is fried fish. If you're looking for tapas, here. If you're looking for this, here. And kind of sent his how-to guide of like his top 10 spots for everything in the city, which was really cute. And that's something that you can rinse and repeat, and it was sent directly on WhatsApp. So it's easy to navigate and have a look at. And it kind of keeps you out of a lot of the tourist traps. And we found some really nice places through that. So
love that. So let's talk about task management and think about how I've often heard it said that your cleaning team are the most important team in your business because they're your eyes and your ears. Now, we know that AI can very easily dispatch a cleaner. That's that schedule a cleaner, make sure, cleaner cancels, schedule a new cleaner. That's what it's there to do. But having that, whether it be the cleaner or whether it be you visiting your property as a host, having those eyes and the ears is going to help you look out for long-term problems within a property like damp, mold, construction across the street that looks like it's going to take a number of years to complete. And again, this is the idea. It's moving away from this idea of it just being about like the tasks of being a property manager to also discussing the value that clearly everybody's adding here, which is the best property managers that I speak to the whole time, they're thinking about the long-term health of the properties that they manage. So they're recommending preventative steps like, maybe it's time for a repaint. Maybe it's time to do some damp-proof coursing in this room. This is getting a little bit old. Does the roof need to be looked at? It's ensuring that you can go from beyond the A to B of like, this is a booking, cleaning's been scheduled, check out, cleaning's been done, we move on to the next booking, to threading the whole experience. And I think, I don't know if you agree with this, Sarah, it's something that we don't shout about enough as service providers. And the service providers that I know, that should be front and center on your website, right? Is this idea that you're going to make sure that there is a semi-regular or twice yearly review of the quality of the property to ensure that whether you're someone that's out of town and never at your property or someone that uses it 6 months a year, you're filling in the gaps to ensure that it's being well looked after, as well as just the routine tasks of getting a guest in and out.
I would completely agree with that. It's really interesting you bring this up. The architect that I worked with when I purchased my rental property here in Barcelona, her original specialty before short-term rentals became completely demonized in my city was actually Airbnb properties. And so she told me one of the things that she normally does when she would complete the construction is the owner of the property, her and a couple of the contractors would meet and they would all host a dinner party in the property, not just to celebrate, but really to figure out what is it like to cook a meal in this property and what are we missing? And what have we not done properly? So like that, the idea is like, if you can, you sleep there. So you test the water pressure, you test the hot water, like all these things that you wouldn't think about because if it's a rental unit, and that they do that once a year as well. So I thought this was a really interesting thing. And you can absolutely tell as a guest when someone has cooked a meal in that property and when they have not. Because you're missing things, you notice, well, okay, hey, there's no spatula here. Well, that's strange. Like maybe you wouldn't think about a spatula, but depending on what you're cooking, you need a spatula. So it becomes really apparent, and that's what makes the difference between a property feeling like, okay, this is a place where I've felt welcome and I've felt at home. And for me, that's the reason I choose a short-term rental instead of a hotel, is that ability to feel a little bit more at home. And versus like, okay, this is a generic property where they have got a bare minimum and they have random things. So like there was one that had a colander, but they didn't have wine opener. Who doesn't have a wine opener? People, this is mission critical. We need a wine opener. So things like that, where you just think nobody has actually cooked in this property. And that makes a huge difference. And a lot of that in terms of the wear and tear as well, you're absolutely right, comes down to the cleaners. So I think a lot of times it's easy to view that as part of the process that we need to optimize in terms of costs. But really, that should be where you're not optimizing cost in the same type of way. So it's worth you paying an extra couple dollars or euros an hour to that cleaner if they do a really good job and they're informing you of like, hey, there's a smell here. Hey, this is happening. They can maybe even coordinate with somebody to come fix it, or maybe they're there to let somebody in to do the maintenance, let's say. So I think this is one of the areas where it's a perfect example of the human element and where we should not be cutting costs. Cut costs on cleaning products, cut costs on, setting your prices, all these things that can be automated with AI. But on the human element, that's where it pays to have good talent. Oh,
it's about trust, isn't it? About trust.
Yeah.
So I think, and we both speak to property managers and hosts the whole time in our day jobs. And the consensus, I think, is that you need to have a really good relationship with your cleaning team so that you trust them and they trust you. So they go the extra mile. They're very much bought into your business. And I've heard it said, now, I'm sure some people use an element of outsourcing alongside their own staff, especially for peak season, things like that. It's not an exact science, but having that core that you trust, it might even cost you a little bit more, but it's going to save you a lot of money in retaining owner relationships and making sure that your preventative approach to maintenance and repairs means that problems don't become bigger problems. So it depends. It's spending a penny up front to save a pound, right? At the back is how you could see it. That also extends to a handyman. So I think and again, I use this word nous again, because the smartest property managers I speak to and hosts are the ones that either they're very good at doing that sort of thing themselves. So that's quite typical for a host. But otherwise, they have a person for everything, and they know how much money they spend every year with that person. So they're building that professional relationship with them. If you manage 50 units in a city, then you're likely to have if you work out how much business you've thrown to the plumber, the builder, the electrician, is likely to be $500,000, right? Or $1 million. But by the time you've gone into a couple of years worth of building a partnership, that shouldn't be a one and done. Schedule a handyman, move on. That should be about building a relationship with that handyman, so that you are the first phone call they answer when they see your call come in. They're like, oh great, it's Leo from ABC Villas. This is an important client. And that idea of networking locally is super important. So like, you build that you're in your community, hyper local. You've got a guy for something and you've got your cleaners for something else. That is going to save you a lot of money, and that is going to help build and enhance your relationship. And that I think is true of how most of the successful property managers work today. That's great. Showcase that. I would say that needs to be front and center in your owner pitch deck, right? It's not, look at all these channels we can put you on, because anyone can do that. Look, if something goes wrong at 4 a.m, we'll be able to fix it because we have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. And then it's about being professional and being accountable. And again, these are all skills that people in our industry have been demonstrating the whole time with their businesses. Now, the hope is that AI liberates them from the day-to-day so they can just focus on doing more of that, and ultimately, again, using that additional time to do surprise and delight elements as well. So I'm still convinced that being a local actor is very, very important. It's going to be something we touch on in a couple of weeks, because we're going to be speaking to a guest who's scaling property management businesses in a really interesting way. And I want to drill down in this, Sarah, because I still remain convinced that it is the way to grow, is to have that local presence. So yeah, more of that coming from us this year.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, Leo. And also, ultimately, this is what's going to help our industry not die out, and it's going to help our industry remain strong, is a local council wants to speak to a human being. They want to know that they can call up Rachel, that they know manages 3 properties in their neighborhood or in this specific area, rather than just calling up some generic company and trying to get the right person. So that makes a huge difference. With the neighbors, it's the same thing. Neighbors can often be really great at like, hey, these people are throwing a party, or hey, these people are potentially doing something in this rental property that might not be, it might go against the code, or might have additional wear and tear on the property, or, they can be your eyes and ears as long as they are allies. And so I think if you can manage those local individuals, then it's not just your cleaners that are coming in that are seeing the property within the property, but it's also, okay, how do I better select the people that are going to be staying in this property? How do I make sure that this property is part of the community and not some kind of antagonistic element to the local community? So I think that's all a really big part of it. And a lot of that is having a human being rather than speaking to a chatbot, let's say.
And if we live in this world where for lots of people now, there will be the temptation to not pay a 15 to 20% management fee, but to pay a couple of percent to the software stack that they've put together using AI, depending on how techie they are. They've bought an off-the-shelf thing or they've threaded their own thing together, depending on how technical they are. There is going to be a growth, continuous growth in people choosing that option, as individual hosts. In some respects, that's always existed though. Individual hosts are still the mainstay of the industry. That most properties listed on, say, Airbnb are managed by individual hosts. So that element's always existed. What I think is really, really interesting for the property management and co-hosting community is how you then convince the person that's tempted to go with that route what it is you are doing as a service offering. And that's the key, is accept that some people are going to, if it makes it easier for people to individually host, they will do it. They'll choose that path. But what is your value add for the person that's wavering and the person that's going, well, even if it is a 15, 20% management fee, I'm still making 80%. What are you doing for me to make it worthwhile? And for me, I think the big thing, and we've talked about hospitality and moments and increase, I still think the big thing for an owner is out of hours, hassle, 4 a.m, lockouts, not really wanting to engage with guests. And it's impossible, I think, to reasonably predict that you're never going to have to engage with guests if you're just using software and technology. So I definitely don't think the 15 to 20% management fee is a thing of the past, but we are entering that world where for people who already have that will to go and do it on their own, there is going to be more software to an AI tech to allow them to do that. But you've almost got to forget about that and it's the guys who are wavering between that you need to work on.
Yeah, I think we're also seeing another interesting trend because of some of the things that are happening where owners are a lot more persnickety, I guess you could say. Where when I'm speaking with property managers that are looking to grow their portfolio, a lot of times it's, hey, like right now I have 50 properties. I'd rather have 30, but I want these kinds of properties. And what are those kinds of properties? They're larger properties. They're 4+ bedrooms that have a lake view or something like that. They're really special traditional vacation rentals. So I think what I'm noticing a lot, just anecdotally, is these property managers saying, look, I have the same amount of work for a 4-bedroom house on the lake that earns me 3 times what this 2-bedroom in the city is earning me. So I'm going to focus on that in my portfolio. And now if somebody comes to me with one of these other types of properties, I just don't even take it on because it's not worth the hassle to me. So I think we're also going to see a lot more of that, where the industry is getting more competitive, but in the opposite way, to where there's owners that maybe want somebody to manage their property and nobody's going to want to take it on, depending on what kind of property it is. And so I think AI could be a really interesting door opener for those types of properties, especially as we see consolidation. And this all goes back to the same point we were talking about earlier, which is property managers want to streamline things. So they want to have the day-to-day operations. Hey, if I can make the same amount of money with 15 properties, it doesn't matter what size the property is. It's cost me the same amount of work. It's the same amount of inquiries. It's the same amount of questions. And actually, sometimes from what they've told me, it's fewer. They get fewer inquiries on the larger properties because it's a different caliber guest. There's less wear and tear on the property. Tend to be more satisfied. They plan farther in advance. And so, they've researched this property in more detail than somebody who just booked 2 weeks ago in the city, and is causing problems. So I think that's also an interesting trend that I'd love to keep an eye on over the upcoming months, because it's something that I'm hearing a lot more of anecdotally in my conversations with property managers that I think we're going to continue to see for sure.
And also where that takes me is that's that property manager carving out more of a niche for themselves. So going, I'm going to specialize in these larger properties because I know who the guest is. And the more I know who my guest is, the more I can go and find them again. In the case of larger, more expensive villas, that also might mean they're less likely to book on an OTA because they're looking for something very specific. They want to have a conversation with you, or their PA might want to have a conversation with you, make sure this property is safe, secure, private, whatever it might be. So again, it goes that I think you're right. I think as people get savvier and smarter, they're looking for a very particular type of thing. I don't know if that's exclusively true across the board, but lots of my clients or people I know in the industry, when they find their groove, they then start to understand that, they're not necessarily looking to be mass market, far from it. They're looking to specialize, and that does allow them. And it's really interesting because I think this is such a broad stroke thing to say, but it's very typical for when you're starting out to be obsessed by how many properties you've got. And when you've been in it a few years, it's more likely that you're obsessed with how much revenue you're making, not as a business, not thinking about oh, we've grown to 100. So, people often set off on growth mode. It's about that, getting those metrics up and then come back into, great, we're generating 10 million a year. That's a really good place for us to be. It supports our staff and allows us to provide a really good hospitality experience. Look, it's exciting. We talk about it all day. We'll talk about it all year. Let's wrap up. We're going to have our good friend Hayley Anderson with us next week, where we'll be talking about the host's checklist for 2026, all the essentials. Really looking forward to that one. If you've enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe, and all the usual social places. We are The Check-In. Find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Sarah, lovely to see you, my friend. Great to be back together.
Same here, buddy.
See you soon.